In this video I'm going to be looking at my favourite budget portrait lenses. Join me. Roll titles. Well, hi YouTube, Brian James at M43 guy with you once again, and today I'm in a wonderful little place. This is about 300 meters away from where I live, and it's a little bee garden. It's absolutely fantastic, and it's somewhere which I walk past almost every day, but I very rarely stop into it. I just stopped into it today. I'm having a look around as I'm talking because I'm fascinated by the place. It's tiny, but it's a little hive, for want of a better pun, a hive of activity. There's loads of little bees around here, there's butterflies and all sorts of things, but there's a great variety of plants in a lovely little setting. They come and sit down, and it's a bit of a sun trap too. So I'll show you some pictures of it now. Keep watching. I'll show you some pictures of it as we're talking. Well, I'm here today to tell you, follow up on my event photography favourite lenses. This one's my favourite studio lenses, and I thought, well, I could do a nice studio setting, but not all portrait photographs and not all people photographs are done in studios. So sometimes it's really nice to come out and leave a studio environment behind. But these lenses are what I use for portraits and for people photos, if you like, where I'm doing something which is staged, either with a photographic background or when I'm outside with a nice setting where I'm going to be doing portraits. Now, the portrait could be all sorts of things. It could be a full body portrait, it could be just a head and shoulders or a torso up, or it could be just a simple headshot. And these four lenses I'm going to show you today are what I consider my favourite budget Micro Four Thirds portrait and people lenses. Now, I better explain because I got a few comments on the last one about. In fact, I've had it on I did a one which above. If you have a look above, you'll find that there's a link to my 5 favourite lenses of all time, and there were 5 favourite budget lenses. Now, I got lots of comments on that, and I got lots of comments on my video which I released just the other day with my my favourite event lenses. And again, there's a link above to that, where people were giving me suggestions about things like the Olympus F12, the Olympus 12 meter to 40mm f2.8, and the 12 to 35 2.8 Lumix. And I'm not dismissing those. I'm not dismissing those lenses at all, but they're not what I consider budget lenses. They are what I consider professional grade lenses, and it's a bit of a crossover because it's not as cut and dried, which you'll find out in a few moments when I start showing you these lenses. But generally what I'm on about is that I'm keeping away from the higher priced end if possible. Now, also I did in the last video the event lenses, say about the 12 to 200, and somebody pointed out quite rightly that that's not a cheap lens. But the trouble is that there's nothing below that which gives that range, and I felt worthy to include that because it gives a terrific amount of range, a terrific quality, and for the price it is well worth it. there really aren't any inexpensive lenses anymore. Everything's expensive, but it's where it comes into. So in these budget lens videos, I'm trying to avoid the pro range as much as possible. So that brings us to my lenses. Well, the majority of stuff that I used to be shooting in the studio, shooting people, tended to be head and shoulders or upper torso type shots. I was shooting an awful lot of school photography where it was mainly that chest upwards to try and get that in and centered on the head. And there's a bit of an impasse on this insofar as just using the best lens and using the best lens to take the photograph with. I'm not about image quality on this, I'm about being able to take the photograph. And a lot of being able to take the photograph is relating to the person that you're taking the photograph of. If you're up in the face, it's very intimidating. If you're too far away, then you can't get the message across, you're shouting, and it doesn't have that intimacy. So it's a good thing. I usually find about 6 to 8 feet. Well, I'm about 6 to 8 feet in front of the person I'm taking the photograph, so where it makes them feel comfortable, because remember, most people aren't professional models. It makes them feel comfortable, and it also gives me some working room so that I can move around and not be too compressed in. So if I'm doing my general type shots, first lens, which I recommend all the time, and as I say, these are budget, but you're going to be surprised because all the lenses I'm going to suggest here are prime lenses. And keep watching, because I'll tell you towards the end as to why I don't recommend some of the zoom lenses, or which, if I do recommend the zoom lens, which one. But my first one has to be this one. This is the little Olympus 45mm f1.8. It is just beautiful. Now, there will be people coming up with the 42.5 Lumix lens, which again is a superb lens. It is more expensive than this one, and although you do get a better image quality from the Lumix, this one as a budget lens really does come into it really well. If you can stretch to the Lumix, I would probably suggest it. But this, as a link above, I might run out of links. If you find that there's not a link there, it means I've run out of tabs, but there'll be a link above to the video which I did on this a couple of years ago. This is one of my favourite lenses of all time, actually. It's just superb, but very, very small, 37mm on the filter thread. Can cause a few problems for some people, but totally unintimidating when it's on the front of the camera when you're taking photographs of people. This one really is good for getting the head shot and the upper body shot from the sort of the chest upwards and the head. It really is a good lens for that if you're doing this. The f1.8, well, why am I going for primes? f1.8, just said. It gives you the ability to get a really shallow depth of field if you want to. Don't get drawn into the field though that every time you do a portrait it has to be really shallow depth of field. Be imaginative, because everybody else has really shallow depth of field. Doesn't mean to say that you have to. You can get some fantastic shots by opening the aperture out a bit. In fact, normally on these I'm shooting about f5.6, f4, f5.6 on micro four thirds on this, because I don't go for that really shallow depth of field. I like the whole face, the whole head to be in focus, and maybe a touch at the back to give a little bit of context of what I'm shooting. So the Olympus 45mm f1.8 prime, superb, really good value for money, and this is my go-to headshot lens. The next lens I would go for is the one just to get me a little bit further out. And why I've come to these conclusions, if the 45mm is about a 90. When I was shooting full frame Canon, I was usually shooting an 85mm, and I found that was great. So the 45mm on micro four thirds, which equates to a full frame 90mm, again fits nicely into that. The other lens I would really go to was the 50mm, the nifty 50. I used to shoot on Canon with a 50mm f1.4, and I found that to be a really, really good lens. Coming out to 4/3, that equates to 25mm. And I haven't gone for the cheapest one on this. I did a video, comparison video between the f1.7 Lumix 25mm and the f1.8 Olympus 25mm earlier on in the year when I was in Cyprus, as a link above. And I realized that the Lumix to me had focus breathing difficulties. If you're stopping down the aperture at all, it's fine when it's wide open because the aperture doesn't change, but I did find focus breathing if you're going down a little bit. And I did find the overall performance, especially for autofocus speed, on the Olympus to be superior on both Olympus and Lumix cameras. The Lumix lens on Lumix cameras really worked well. It's not so good on the Olympus cameras, I found, for autofocus speed. So I go for this one, and this is getting me that little bit further out. And one of the things that I'm really wanting to be take super care of when I'm taking studio portraits at all, or portraits at all, whether it's studio or outside, I want to try and avoid distortion, especially facial distortion. There's nothing worse. One of the banes of my life over the last 10 or 15 years has been to see the duck pout from selfies done on mobile phones, where because it is a wide lens and very close in, you get that sort of narrowing of the face and elongation of the head, and I really dislike that. It became a style all of its own, but it's not a style I liked. So with a 25mm on this, even fully open, you're not tending to get any distortions. And again, that f1.8, if you are shooting in low light, is great, and if you want a good bokeh, this will give you a good enough bokeh for 99% of things that you want without going up to the professional series, you know, the 1.2 or whatever. As I say, a bit pricier, double the price of the Lumix, but I still think it fits in the budget category really, really well, and a lens that's well worth having for people photography, because it just doesn't distort. It really gives you some fantastic shots when you want to get broader, say from the knees up to the head. You know, you're getting almost a full shot, a 3/4 shot of a person. Superb lens for this, and again, small, discreet. All of them are, in fact, on this one. 25mm f1.8 Olympus. Now I'm going to the wide open lens here, and if I'm going to be taking photographs of people who are maybe in a situation, if they were here sitting down on this seat and I was in the garden, I wanted to get them in a nice pose where I've got the full body and a little bit of background, but you're getting towards a distortion end on this. Again, you don't want to be too close, too far away, but when you're getting a full body with something like the 45mm, I'd be halfway across the street, so that really wouldn't be a usable lens. Again, I'll go back to my f1.8 17mm Olympus. This is equivalent to a 34mm on full frame, and I used a 35mm an awful lot when I was taking photographs of people. I find it's a really nice lens. If you get too close in, or if you get too silly an angle on them, you can start getting into the distortions a little bit, so be careful on that. But insofar as having a full body shot for somebody where you've got a bit of context around the back, if I was taking something in this garden, perhaps I would be making sure I've got some of the plants in the background where you could see the flowers, and that would give something of a story to the photograph. The 17mm is absolutely fantastic. Now, if you're going down the Lumix route, I think the 15's starting to get a bit too wide for me, so I'd probably go for the 20, but again, the 20mm isn't a big enough gap between the 25 and the 20. So again, I say the 17 is absolutely fantastic. The 15mm, you get down towards a 30mm full frame equivalent, and you're just starting to get that little bit of hint of distortion setting in. I do like this because, again, if I'm doing a full person shot, I'm at that decent distance away from them where I can still give instructions as to how I want them to pose or how I want them to set themselves without having to shout, but also not being in their personal space. So my third lens, yes, there is a few lenses in this one, is the 17mm f1.8 Olympus. Now, before we go any further, I know I keep on saying this in every video, but it really does matter to me an awful lot. Don't forget to leave a comment below and give me a big thumbs up and a like if you would, because that does help YouTube to spread these videos more and more. And if you get the chance to hit the subscribe button below, please do so. My final prime lens, because there's 4 prime lenses that I would use, and of course you don't have to have all of these lenses. It depends on what you shoot normally. If you do primarily headshots, you don't need the 17mm necessarily. You don't need the wider ones. If you're doing predominantly full person shots, or maybe even small groups, then the 17mm and the 25mm really will come in useful for that. The one I'd love to have in this is the 1.8 75mm Olympus lens. I think that is just a beautiful, beautiful lens, but cost wise it is so prohibitive from a budget lens review. So I've left that one out, and what I have brought in is this. This is a stunning little lens, especially for the price. This is the Sigma 60mm f2.8. Now, I did a review on this one a year or two back as well, and I just can't tell you how good a lens this is. Pin sharp, really is a good lens, contrast really good on it, and all sorts of things. Very unusual manual focus, it being a bit smooth and shiny. It wasn't designed as a micro four thirds lens. It's one of these lenses from Sigma where they'll put different backs on, so you can get these in an E mount and all sorts of things. But in a micro four thirds mount, this 60mm equates to a 120mm. And this is giving you the real tight headshots if you want those, but again, keeping that workable distance. You're not, you know, if you're that's 6 to 8 foot, you're not going to get much more than the head and the neck, maybe, you know, that sort of thing. But if you're wanting those particular tight headshots, this really is a good lens. If you're starting to get to the sort of torso shots, you're getting a bit too far away, because this, with the 120mm full frame equivalent, is quite a long lens. It's getting into a medium to small telephoto range. Comes with a really nice lens hood as well. Always like this lens, but the best part of it was, this cost me, I believe, because you can't get them new now, but I believe it was £129. Now, I can't think of really much to replace this. I think if I was to be replacing this with something, the 75mm lens, as I say, is fantastic. It's a big lens though. It's quite a huge lens, that. But I would, it's a bit too long for most occasions, and the one that I would probably suggest to replace this, which isn't budget, but it does get you into another realm of photography, is the Olympus 60mm macro, which I reviewed a month or two back. As a 60mm lens, ignore the macro part, as a 60mm lens, it really was fabulous. But considerably more expensive than this. But if you can get your hands on one of these, they are on the second-hand market, and they were about £129 in the UK when I bought this 3 or 4 years ago. Considerably less on second-hand. There was a whole series of these. I think there was a 19mm and a 34mm or something like that. But really, really good lens. If you can get it, then great. The only off-putting thing, which if you know what the reasoning is, it's not too bad, but if you didn't realise, you may think you got a duff one. If I shake this, you can hear the autofocus mechanism vibrating inside, and from what I can gather talking to people, it's held in a sort of magnetic field when it's switched on. When you switch it on, it gets held into that for the autofocus. So, Sigma f2.8 60mm lens, and this is the DN series of lenses which were out, and as I say, just absolutely fantastic. Yep, can't fault it. Now, while you're on here, don't forget, if you would like to support the channel, we work at a loss on this channel, but I'm just trying to bring you content to make it interesting for you. So if you can give me any support, there's a few ways to do it. In the down below here, you'll find that we now do a super thanks. If you want to leave me a super thanks donation, please do. That's on the box underneath the video screen itself. But also, if you go into the details below, you'll find there's 2 links. One is a PayPal link if you want to leave me a one-off help for the channel. A cup of coffee or something towards the petrol really would be useful when I'm going out on some of these shoots. Or you can become a patron of the channel. There's 3 different levels, and you get some extra videos and bits and pieces from that. And you'll find that these people here are already patrons, so you can add your name to the list on that, and that's a small monthly payment, but it really is important to the channel. And I thank everybody who's given me support over the time that we've been running this channel, because it is really essential. So I did say about zoom lenses. Well, the problem is the zoom lenses I would choose, which can give me anywhere near the performance of these lenses here, are the Pro Series lenses. And I'm going to do a video on the Pro Series lenses separately, which I'll be uploading to the Patreon channel first. So it'll be coming out on YouTube probably towards the end of this month. But in the budget side, I can't really recommend any of those lenses. So if you are using a zoom lens, it doesn't stop you from taking great studio or people or portrait type shots or whatever. But you're not going to have some of the range of it. And one of the lenses I would really go for is, again, my favourite lens, which is the Lumix 12-60, the straightforward budget one, not the Leica. And again, there's a cost implication on that. But it's the one that it's my favourite lens of all. And it is just so useful. It's f3.5 to f5.6. When you've got it up towards the 40-45mm sort of side of things, which is round about the 2/3 of the way up the range, you've got all the range of these lenses that I've just been doing, all the way from 12mm, which is basically too wide for me because you're getting distortions come in, but you're able to get the 17, you're able to get the 25mm, the 45mm and 60mm all on the one lens. And even at f5.6, it's not too bad. As I say, you're not going to be able to get that super shallow bokeh that you'd get with an f1.8 or an f2.8 lens, but it is going to give you the ability to really get some good shots. The other thing with portrait photography for me is that generally you're not too worried about light. If you're shooting in the studio, you're normally using studio strobes or speed lights, where you can set the amount of power of the light to give you the aperture that you want. If you're outside, well, yes, towards the end of days, end of the day or the first thing in the morning, you may find that you're a little bit low on light. But again, on that, you can get round it to an awful large extent. But I'd be more interested in what's happening with the depth of field than I am the light, because I can get an awful lot out of the camera. And even at f5.6, it's still not super slow on that. Now, one of the things I would say, though, when you're shooting with these lenses, especially in the studio, try and get the ISO super low. In the studio, you can get it to just about what you want. So I've been normally shooting at the standard ISO setting on the Micro Four Thirds, which is ISO 200. But I'd really be keeping it as low as possible to get the best picture quality possible. Again, when you're shooting outside, most of the time when you're shooting somebody, it probably won't be really dark. It's very rare you're going to be doing photos like that. So again, try and keep the ISO as low as possible. Bear in mind, though, you are going to have less available light. But it may be worth looking towards getting a small handheld fill-in flash with a transmitter, so you can hold it off to one side and use some of the fill-in, and that's going to give you some of the advantages back. But basically, on studio shots, unlike what I was saying on the events where you can let the ISO run a little bit, I would try and keep the ISO as low as possible to get the best possible quality out of it. But don't fret if the lens doesn't let you do that. Again, you're more interested in getting the shot than you are the technical side. So even if you do have to push the ISO up a little bit, then worry about getting the shot. And also remember, of course, you're dealing with a person, so you don't necessarily have to have super high shutter speeds either. If you've got somebody posed, they're not likely to move around too much, so you can really bring your shutter speeds down. And most good Micro Four Thirds cameras have got in-body stabilization or in-lens stabilization, so you can get some really good shots handheld or use a tripod. But back to my zoom lens, I would suggest that, but really the trouble with the zoom lens is that the quality isn't quite there compared to the primes, and also you haven't really got the adaptability of the aperture. However, when you're starting in photography, if you're looking at budget lenses, you're probably towards the early days of photography, and if that's the case, then really take what you've got. If you've only got the zoom lens, so long as you've got a big enough range, then great. The only thing on the zoom lens, avoid the super wide angle to avoid that distortion that you can get. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope you've got something useful out of it. My name is Brian James, Micro Four Thirds guy. Don't forget, keep taking your camera out, keep shooting whatever you want to, whether it's events or people, portraits, whatever it is. Keep on taking your camera out, but most importantly, have fun with your photos. See you next time. Bye bye.